Alright, it's post Justice League 5 casting part 2. The very last video of the DCEU Project. Unless I can find a way to milk this out for as long as I possibly can. But, moving on. Next film is The Sea Devils. For Biff Bailey, he would be played by Luke Bracey. Dane Dorrance would be played by Wyatt Russell, June Walton would be played by Maisie Williams, and Nikki Walton would be played by Maxwell Jenkins. The villains would be the Manfish, and they would just be CGI characters. Or practicals. Next up is Firestorm, and I have Logan Lerman as Ronnie Raymond, Sam Neill as Martin Stein, Kate Blanchett as the second Killer Frost, Louise Lincoln, and Natalie Dormer would appear as the first Killer Frost, and Matthew Fox would appear as Ronnie's father. Next is Zoriel the Fallen Angel. Ed Stobbard is Zoriel, Richard Armitage is Asmodel, Morgan Freeman is the Presence, Ian McDermott is Neron, Matthew McNulty is Etrigan, Kevin Conroy is Michael, and William Moseley is Triumph. Next up is Injustice 2, Gods Against Us. Most of the cast stays the same, but a bunch of characters either don't show up or just died in the original show. These are only the new characters. Connor Lance McQueen is played by Mason Shea Joyce. Jason Todd is played by Timothy Chalamet. Lucius Fox is played by Jaimin Honsu. Adam is played by Billy Crudup. Talia al Ghul is played by Priyanka Chopra. Athanasia al Ghul, dumb fucking name, is played by Lola Flannery. Ted Kord is played by Tobey Maguire. Jaime Reyes is played by Karen Brar. Booster Gold is played by Chase Crawford. Aqualad is played by Leon Thomas III. Natasha Irons is played by Zendaya. Supergirl is played by Catherine Newton. Allura Inzi is played by Julian Huff. Zor-El is played by Patrick Wilson. Brainiac is played by Ralph Fiennes. Wildcat is played by Joel Edgerton. Jennifer Pierce is played by Vanessa Morgan. Lucy Quinzel is played by Julia Donenfeld. Professor Ivo is played by Martin Freeman. Imezo is played by Connor Swindells. Brother Eye is played by David Lofel. Red Robin is played by Lucas Jade Zuman. Wonder Girl is played by Madison Eisman. Starfire is played by Skylar Samuels. Superboy is played by Spencer Bolbin. Dr. Midnight is played by Billy Burke. Antiope is played by Oda Annabelle. Philippus is played by Olga Kurylenko. Ryan Choi is played by John Cho. Soranik is played by Alexander Breckenridge. Arisia is played by Virginia Gardner. Jim Wick is played by Roger Cross. Princess Ireland is played by Marcia Cross. Salak is played by Bern Gorman, and Lobo is played by Zach McGowan. Next up is Tommy Tomorrow, and literally the only character I have is Tommy Tomorrow, and he's going to be played by Cole Sprouse. Next is Ambush Bug, and I have Charlie Day as Ambush Bug, that's just perfect casting, and Johnny DC would be played by Florence Pugh. Next is Metal Men. Gold would be played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. Lead would be played by Peter Serafinowicz. Mercury would be played by Nicolas Cage. Tin would be played by DJ Qualls. Iron would be played by Patrick Warburton. Platinum would be played by Halston Sage. And Will Magnus would be played by Nathan Fillion. For Justice League Dark 3, only new character would be Hecate, played by Helena Bonham Carter. Next up is Vigilante. Frank Grillo would play Vigilante. I thought it would fit with him rather nicely. The villain would be Anthony Scarapelli, played by Timothy Omenson. Lucy Walters would play Doris Chase. Julian Hillard would play Adam Chase. And Claire Ryan would play Drew Chase in flashbacks. Next up is Superman's Secret Identity, and Hank Greenspan would play a young Clark Kent. David Corenswet would play the older Superman. Sandra Bullock would play Laura Kent. Dermot Mulroney would play David Kent. Catherine Langford would play Lois Chodori. Matt Bomer would play Agent Malloy. Jackson A. Dunn would play Mike Ori. Brooklyn Prince as Cassie. Jane/Carol Kent would be played by Josephine Langford. And Wendy Case would be played by Olivia Wilde. For the Creeper, I have him played by Will Arnett. Dr. Yatz would be played by Madison Mason. And Proteus would be played by Pete Plozek. Then for the Inferior 5, Merry Man would be played by John Mulaney. Awkward Man would be played by Jack Whitehall. The Blimp would be played by Zach Galifianakis. White Feather would be played by Pete Davidson, as much as I despise the man. Crappy adult comedies are kind of his thing. And Dumb Bunny would be played by Jenny Slate. Next up is Batman the Caped Crusader. Batman would be played by Finn Wittrock. Alfred Pennyworth would be played by Michael Sheen. Lucius Fox would be played by Forrest Whitaker. Harvey Dent would be played by Sebastian Stan. Vicky Vale would be played by Lucy Boynton. Jim Gordon would be played by Matt Damon. Catwoman would be played by Scarlett Johansson. Oswald Cobblepot would be played by Tom Ellis. Roland Desmond would be played by Conan Stevens. Carmine Falcone would be played by Ron Perlman. Hamilton Hill would be played by Bill Pullman. Victor Zsasz would be played by Elijah Wood. Arnold Wesker would be played by David Paymer. John Doe would be played played by Anthony Ingruber. Renee Montoya would be played by Sophia Carson. Commissioner Peter Grogan would be played by Kurt Russell. Regina Zellerbach would be played by Allison Janney. Jack Ryder would be played by Jimmy Simpson. Thomas Wayne would be played by Milo Ventimiglia. Martha Wayne would be played by Christina Ricci. Amanda Waller would be played by CTH Pounder. Aman Navesta would be played by Nassim Pedrad. Tiffany Fox would be played by Yara Shahidi. The Riddler would be played by Edward Norton. Bane would be played by Dave Bautista. Mr. Freeze would be played by Kevin Durand. Harley Quinn would be played by Betty Gilpin. Harvey Bullock would be played by John C. Reilly. Vernon Blake would be played by Hugh Jackman. And Rumi Moore would be played by Song Kang-ho. Now we have Batman Master of the Future, and new characters would include Julie Madison, played by Jennifer Carpenter, Rupert Thorne, played by Vincent Cassell, and Alexander Leroy, played by Jean Dujardin. Next is the Trenchcoat Brigade, with Pyotr Constantine, played by David Bradley, the Whining Ones voiced by Steve Blum, and Managala, played by Neil Gaiman. Then Thomas Blake Catman, we have Matthew Lillard as Thomas Blake. Rachel Weisz would play his love interest, Rebecca Mooney. Then for Kid Eternity, I have Noah Jupe as the titular hero. Chris Rock would play Mr. Keeper. Sasha Dewan would play Masterman. Wink, wink. Mara Steenburgen would play Her Highness. Laura Surridge would play Silk. Billy Zane would play Frank Malone. Timothy Dalton would play Dr. Marco. Ryan Hurst, Dominic Purcell, and Vin Diesel would play the Thugoths. And Don Cheadle would play Mr. Taker. Captain Marvel, Plastic Man, and Manhunter would make cameos. Now for the Freedom Fighters, I have Uncle Sam, played by Bob Odenkirk, The Ray, played by Ansel Elgort, Dollman, played by Kevin Schmidt, Black Condor, played by Blair Redford, Human Bomb, played by Hunter Parrish, Phantom Lady, played by Evan Rachel Wood, and Adolf Hitler, played by Tom Schilling. Then Night Force, we have Baron Winters, played by James Spader, Vanessa Van Helsing, played by Inbar Lavi, Jack Gold, played by Tom Goodman Hill, Donovan Kane, played by Michael Jai White, and Zadok Grimm, played by Scott Speedman. Deacon Blackfire would be played by Chris Christopherson, Neron would be played by Tobias Menzies, Count Dracula would be played by Benicio del Toro, and Satan would be played by Julian Bleach. I also decided to ditch the ever-changing cast, although I might implement it later on if I can think of good characters to add. Next is Wave Rider, and he would be played by Rupert Grint. Next is Misadventures of Space Cabbie, and Space Cabbie would be played by Patton Oswalt. Next is Superman Distant Fires, and Superman would be played by Alexander Draymond. Aquaman would be played by Christopher Hivchu. Big Barda would be played by Famke Jensen. Cheetah would be played by Sofia Boutella. Guy Gardner would be played by Kellen Lutz. Ice would be played by Charlotte Frogner. Joker would be played by Alan Tudyk. Matrix would be played by Ashley Benson. Mr. Miracle would be played by Logan Marshall Green. Wonder Woman would be played by Geraldine Haquel. Billy Batson would be played by Jonah Howard King. And Metalo would be played by Zane Holtz. For the smaller characters that appear in spirit, Batman would be played by Anson Mount, Jimmy Olsen would be played by Thomas Brody Sangster, John Kent would be played by Kyle Chandler, Lex Luthor would be played by John Cryer, Lois Lane would be played by Rosemary DeWitt, Martha Kent would be played by Helen Hunt, and Perry White would be played by Sam Elliott. Obviously, the superheroes epilogue doesn't get any new characters, so yeah, moving on. Last, but certainly not least, is 1 Million. And there are a few new cast members. Cal Kent is played by James Freshville. Future Wonder Woman is played by Danae Garcia. Future Batman is played by Alexander Koch. Future Aquaman is played by Ben Dalhouse. John Fox is played by Sam Witwer. Matthew Tyler is played by Alden Ehrenreich. Ferris Knight is played by Eddie Redmayne. Arsenal is played by Brandon Flynn. And Solaris is played by Kevin Michael Richardson. Alright, as I said at the beginning, this is going to be the last DCEU Project video. As saddening it may be, I am kind of happy because now I have room to make actually really interesting videos and more like video essay type videos, and just overall more intriguing ideas. If anything changes, I might make a video about it in terms of the DCEU project, but for now, you guys have the wiki, and if you have any suggestions to expand the wiki, then by all means, comment on this video or any of the other videos, because I get all notifications, obviously. So, that's about it. See you later. Stay tuned for more.